So how many of you were able to grab a coffee and a donut and a conversation? All three. Oh, wow. That's amazing. I think we should kill the channel and just do more of these. That would be amazing. OK, so really excited about this next part. We've done quite a few panel discussions in the past at most of our events, but we've never had such a stellar, such a diverse in terms of experience, kinds of organizations, and even geographic location of panelists till date. So let's get started. We have a pretty stellar lineup. So let's first of all welcome from Toronto, the Director of UX at Shopify, Amy Thibodeau, with a big round of applause. Upcoming next, she traveled all the way from SF to be a part of this panel discussion, Amanda Linden, the Director of UX at Facebook. Again, representing Toronto and a deep knowledge of service design, the partner at Impact Signal, Everton Lewis. Our next speaker, she comes all the way from New York. She heads design at a studio called Idean, Chi Ryan. And last but not the least, our moderator for the evening is Steve Fisher, the principal designer at TELUS, coming from Vancouver.
Thanks, Preet. Okay. Amy took my chair, so that was a good start, Amy.
I'm already messing things up. Sorry.
It's the awkward lower chair, so you get to be the chill panelist. I'm really happy that you're all here today. This is very exciting to be talking about design leadership, to openly share some of the things that we're doing, to learn from each other. I would love for all of us to give Preet and the DesignX team a quick round of applause for all the work they're doing. It takes a lot of effort to put on something like this, and I appreciate communities in design as much as I do, if not more, design leadership. So one of the things that I'm really happy about is that to be able to moderate this panel, because Preet moderated a panel for DesignX for the Design and Content Conference in Vancouver this summer, so it's nice to be able to return the favor. Now, I want to get right into things. So the state of design leadership. I think it would be good for each one of us to introduce ourselves, and perhaps in the order that we came out. So, Amy, why don't you tell everyone a bit about yourself, what it is that you are doing at Shopify, and kick us off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Amy Thibodeau, and I'm a director of UX at Shopify. I lead the app and partner platform area. So what that means is we have this whole ecosystem of third-party app developers and partners who build apps and services for all of our Shopify merchants. And I build the experiences, or my team builds the experiences that enable that. And then we also think, of course, about what the merchant side of things are. So we want to make sure that the experiences that we're building are also a great experience for the merchants who are using Shopify. My team is made up of user researchers, designers, front-end developers, content strategists. And I come from actually a content strategy background myself. I spent 4 years at Facebook in content strategy. So that's me.
Sure, yeah.
Hello, my name is Amanda Linden, and I'm a design director at Facebook. I'm responsible for the profile organization and then also the search organization. So two very different teams with very different cultures. Profile is the second most viewed surface on Facebook, second to Newsfeed. And search is actually the third largest search engine in the world, second to YouTube and Google. So lots of interesting challenges there. I've been there for 1.5 years, and prior to that, I was head of design for a company called Asana, which is managed by the co-founder of Facebook. And prior to that, I was at Intuit, where I managed the small business group.
Thanks.
My name is Everton, and I guess my background, I have a combination of business, design, and technology. So I spent approximately 10 years working at IBM. One of the last things I did at IBM was really launching software as a service consulting business. So I did that, and then I rolled that into another gig with a service design company. So we were looking at how we could actually consult with different organizations and help them think about the services that they create and the experiences that they're creating. So I did that for 4 years, built out practice for financial services, telco, public sector. And I've recently left that, and now I've launched my own firm, Impact Signal, and we're looking at the intersection of analytics and design. So starting to think about, how can we take knowledge on customer as well as data that we have available and help organizations to get better in terms of understanding and predicting behavior.
Thank you. You're up.
It's my go.
Definitely.
I'm Chi, and I'm a transdisciplinary designer. I know that's just another buzzword, probably. I have 3 specializations, so visual communication, spatial, and service design, which fall under experience design, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about what that looks like to me. It's not UX. Ooh, controversial already. I head up the IDEON studio in New York. IDEON is an experience design company globally. We have, I think, about 9 or 10 studios at the moment, but we're rapidly growing. We're part of the Capgemini network, so we fall under a consulting company. And the type of work that we do really varies. We do all kinds of things that fall under experience design, but we like to group them into 2 buckets, so strategic design and detailed design. And the types of designers that we have in our structure really depend on the different studios, but in general, we have visual designers, we have interaction designers, we have service designers, and then we have more detailed design designers, including UI, UX, content designers, and so on.
Great, thank you. And I'm Steve Fisher. I'm at TELUS, more specifically TELUS Digital. I'm the principal designer there, and I am meant to help direct the practice of design and set the vision for our digital design across the organization. We are really distributed. It's this massive telco, and so a big part of our purpose and what design is focused on is changing how a 100-year-old telco works. And so it's nice to see that design has been brought to the table there. And so, Steve. Okay. That was all sweet, but let's get into it here. So I think we'll all be pretty curious about how design leadership works across our different companies. A lot of people see some of the things that we do or will be impacted on it, but I'd be curious to know what is the role of design leadership across our organizations? So who'd like to kick it off? Chi, would you like to do that?
I just spoke, but okay.
Yeah, you did. I know.
I think that the most important thing about design leadership in our organisation is that, design is evolving, and we need people who set the tone for that. And I think that, currently we have a global design leadership team who look at the way that design is, I guess, I don't know how to put it, that design is used throughout the organisation. And I think that the important thing about the way that we work at IDEON is that, everybody has the opportunity to do pretty much anything that they can dream up. So, it's really about, there's some people who are in design leadership roles, if you like, and they're really setting the focus and the tone in terms of the direction that the company wants to go. And then everybody has the opportunity to feed into that. So it's really top-down and bottom-up leadership, if you like.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go across, yeah.
Sure. So I think of it in 2 ways. I think that there's a first piece in terms of communicating the value of design. So really being able to communicate to the team as well as the organization the value of design and designers in the process. The second piece is around creating an environment, right, where voices can be heard, making sure that it's not just the loudest voice, right, that's getting attention, so we can really create an environment where all of the design team as well as the other stakeholders that we're working with can all be part of what we're doing. So in my mind, there's those 2 pieces. So one in terms of communicating the value and helping people to have the stories and the words, right, to be able to do that, and two, really as a leader, creating that environment, right, that's inclusive and allows all of those voices to be heard.
Amanda, how about at Facebook and some of the work you were talking about?
Yeah, so compared to other companies I've worked, like maybe Intuit was a company where, you know, the role of product management would be to sort of craft like what was going to be created. And then the designer or design leader would be in charge of more the how it comes to life. That isn't really the way things happen at Facebook, which has been, at least for me personally, a pleasant surprise. I think that a lot of designers can get a bit overwhelmed with the amount of responsibility design has at Facebook, but you're really responsible for initially helping to craft the people problem. You know, so there'll be some inertia around a particular issue, and I think it'll be a mixture of like a Facebook problem and a people problem. And so oftentimes a designer will put together a bit of a workshop where for 2 days you're sort of looking at all the data, and you have data science and research and PM all coming together to really just kind of craft that the goal statement and the project brief. And that's something that, you know, design is really responsible for. And then a lot of independence in terms of creating prototypes that we go into testing with. And then the PM really works with you on like crafting the execution plan and testing the solution and making sure that you get like, you know, concrete metrics. So that's different. And then I think as design leaders at Facebook, we're really in the process of a transformation in that we're working to build leaders that are good at helping teams do 0 to 1 innovation, meaning make the first version of something. So over the course of several years, Facebook has had one product that they've been iterating and building on and putting more fuel into. And it's really, we're starting toward a change where there's several teams building things that don't exist in the world yet. And the style of design and the pace of design and the amount of time it takes to create a V1 is quite different than if you're iterating on something. So the profile team just launched a dating app, and that was, you know, a year in the making, and for the first 6 months the teams didn't deliver anything, and that was quite different for Facebook, where you're used to like putting something and shipping very quickly.
Okay. And AB, how about Shopify?
Yeah, so Shopify is not organized by discipline, it's sort of organized by problem area. And so when I talk about being the director of UX for App and Partner Platform, that means that I'm really responsible for that, the experience thinking on that broad area. And what that does for me really is it allows me to build a team around a particular type of domain and problem area so that we can really understand it deeply, so that we can work really closely with cross-functional partners on understanding the kind of experiences that we want to build in the short term and also long term for our customers. So I sit at the leadership table with the other leads for that broad area, which includes representatives. It includes a general manager, and it also includes representatives from product management, from data, from engineering, and from the go-to-market side, so marketing and operations. And as a leadership team, we really work hard not to just represent our discipline at the table, but to really represent a perspective on how we're going to build a really healthy culture, a healthy team, and that is going to be really performance-oriented. And by that, I guess I mean that we're really focused on solving the right kinds of problems. I think it's really easy to go very quickly to a solution. I'm definitely a person who feels a great deal of comfort when a team has sort of converged around a particular solution, but I think what I always have to remind myself and what I'm always reminding people at that leadership table is that it doesn't matter if we ship quickly if we're shipping the wrong thing. So we spend a lot of time really falling in love with the problem, and we talk about that a lot. We've actually got a lot of internal propaganda around falling in love with the problem, even down to when our Slack loads, we have our CEO face pop up and it says fall in love with the problem. So it's something that's really baked into our culture at Shopify.
I'm sure that'd be interesting to see Toby just kind of slide in. So at TELUS, the role of design leadership, and more specifically at TELUS Digital, is well, it's distributed across the company. It's this interesting problem where if I took all of TELUS Digital, which is about 400 people, that's less than 1% of the company. and it's a smaller portion of that is design, and yet we're meant to push this innovation, find these North Stars, and work across all these different business units. And so it's an interesting opportunity. And we present ourselves often that way as saying we're looking for the opportunities within the company to, I'm going to use a buzzword here, but to innovate, but really to find ways for our company to work differently, I think is a big part of the role of design leadership within TELUS and TELUS Digital. Because if you can imagine with a telco, things are really different than they were before. You know, I'm not even sure you can describe some of the things that we are doing today, like with TELUS Health and things like that, as a telco anymore. And so it's a unique problem to be a group of people across there trying to not only solve these problems, but to find the opportunities for the company. So I would love to hear from everyone. So we're going to be taking questions from, we've been getting them in from different like sources, social media, Slack. We really appreciate everyone that submitted them. A few people came up to me and like passed a few things along while I arrived here today. At some point, we'll probably be taking a few questions from the audience too. I just want to frame that though. We're not taking opinions from the audience. You know, so please don't do that, but that's okay. We will take your opinions afterwards. But if you have got a burning question that you haven't submitted yet, there will be an opportunity for that. And if you have submitted them, we did pay attention and rolled some of these up. And one of the things that came up a lot is, like, what are the expectations and perceptions across different teams within our organizations? And I think across all of your organizations as well. So when we're looking at design, what do people expect within the business? Whether that's working with clients or on product teams or internally in-house. What's going on here? And Amanda, why don't we start with you this time? We'll just go ahead and jump into the middle.
So the question is, what do people expect from the design function at Facebook?
Yeah, and their perceptions. Like when you are saying we're here to be design leadership, you know, what is the perception of that within Facebook?
I think that we're expected to fuse content strategy, research, and product design together. I think we're held accountable for ensuring that those three functions are working well. I think that we're tasked with making sure that, you know, in my case, that the search and profile parts of Facebook fit well within Facebook as a whole, and that to the extent that we're capable of doing so, making it feel like it was designed almost by one person. And so kind of identifying areas of overlap and inconsistency and working to create, you know, standards and consistency and helping teams that would normally be in a silo work together as one. And then I think we're seen as an advocate for the user. You know, there's a lot of people within the company that are very focused on the business. And so it's our job to make sure that what we're building is going to be successful for Facebook, but also add more user value.
Okay. Do you ever run into pushback on some of the roles, the things that you're pushing out there, and that design is either leading the way or attempting to lead the way on?
I think I don't get pushback in terms of adding user value. I think that all the senior executives at Facebook are extremely concerned about that and even willing to have short-term negative effects happen at the company in order to generate long-term value. You get more pushback from an individual engineer who's like held accountable for shipping something within 6 months and is like, hey, let's get something out the door. Or with teams who would like to work autonomously because, you know, for example, if we're rolling out a new design language and every surface has to adopt that, that means that there's like a slice of engineering across several teams that has to be dedicated to that. And that means that that individual team that has an individual goal is going to have to take some resources off of their immediate term goal towards something that's more holistic. And those are the areas where you really have to be more of an advocate and really sort of explain the value and help remind people that these things matter.
Okay, great. Everton, how about for you in the work that you're doing?
Sure.
What's the expectation perception?
Sure. And I guess a couple of things. Well, one thing I'm going to add is just the 3 last firms that I've worked with have all been consulting firms, right? So working and consulting with large enterprises and large organizations. So, you know, what I'm going to say is going to be flavored by that spin a bit. So as a consulting organization that comes in, and represents, service design, interaction design, any of those types of methods and tools, the expectation is that we can come in and articulate, why, that we can really talk to the business and understand and empathize with what they're doing, right, what the goals are, and that we can actually collaborate, right, and be part of a bigger team. So that's what I would say in terms of answering the expectations around when we're working with other parts of the business and our clients. That's what I would say.
Okay, thanks. G, how about you?
Well, we're a design company, so so internally, we're pretty led by design. But with that said, design is very broad. I don't know about you guys, but it seems to be an expansive universe. The way that design just keeps growing and growing, and different types of design and different disciplines. And I think that one of the things that I find there's a perception out in the world, certainly with clients that we work with sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, and certainly also coming from a consulting space, there's some legacy perceptions around design that are really hard to break. In particular, making shit pretty is probably where it starts, and then it kind of builds from there. Oh, you do UX, yes, and maybe some other things. Oh, you do customer experience. Oh, yes, and a couple of other things. So there's certainly a fair amount of educating that we have to do, and that's probably one of the things that right now that we do a substantial amount with. And I think moving into what we'll probably talk about next, just in terms of the way that design is shifting and what it's becoming, there's a heavy reliance on design companies to help educate clients about what design is in context.
Amy, how about it at Shopify? Now, I know in particular, too, because we talked about this, how you describe Shopify is how it is now, but not how it was even a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So it made a shift from being in disciplines to now focusing on like products and services, correct?
Yeah.
So what are the expectations, perceptions across teams now, and how has that shifted for Shopify?
So I was actually at Facebook when they also made that shift, which was kind of interesting. So when I started at Facebook, it was the same kind of thing. We were organized. We were a design org, and then we became organized around sort of problem areas, which is the same shift that we've done at Shopify. And I really think that doing that it's a scaling thing. You kind of get to a certain size where you have a design or UX team of hundreds of people, and it really makes sense to have them as deeply embedded with other cross-functional partners as possible, for a lot of reasons. So I think one of those reasons is that it really makes sort of the GM or the head of that product area really, really accountable for the user experience in a way that I don't think that they always have to be if UX or design is a central function. So my GM is named Brandon Chu, and he comes from a product management background. And quite honestly, like when this change happened, him and I had a lot of direct conversations. Because I would say to him, look, you're trying to be the PM right now, but you're not the PM, you're the GM. So like we need to sort of shift this conversation. And he has and he did, and I would say we have a really, really productive, healthy product organization. But that relationship of me reporting into him as the director of design really gave me the platform to have that conversation with him and to sort of reset his expectations about what he was responsible for. And that felt really, really positive and productive. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I don't know if I actually ansed your question.
It was interesting.
I don't want to be squirrely here. I'm not trying to be a politician on you.
No, that was great. And so at TELUS, the way that we work at times is like we have like very strict deadlines sometimes. An iPhone launches, and we have to have that thing out there. By the way, so I'm not trying to plug here, but I'm super proud of this moment. We had our iPhone on sale before Apple had their iPhone on sale. So Thanks, team. Yeah,
Ooh,
they're there.
tell us.
Okay. So, but like we have very specific deadlines like that, and then also things that there are no real deadline. We just have to do better at over time. We need to improve upon. But we also then will have a marketing team that maybe isn't as coordinated with our digital team as everyone would like. And so finding ways around that. And some of the perceptions, because TELUS Digital is relatively new, it's like 5 years old, and finding these new ways of working beyond just being like a web team or something like that, has created some strain and bigger opportunities across the company. But has also started to change the expectation perceptions of, okay, you don't just throw this across a fence. It's that we actually need to start that journey together in order to create a great end-to-end experience for our customers, for the people that are using our products and services. And so if I'm honest, some of the expectation perceptions around design are fragmented right now for us. But I don't believe that that's the intent and that we're seeing huge opportunities there in our organization. But it's a real challenge at times. And I think it's good. So we've talked a little bit about our current state in our own personal organizations that we're working with. But what about the state of the industry itself? Like, what are the challenges that we're seeing, regardless of what company we're looking at, around design leadership? You know, so if design has a seat at the table, which I believe it has, you know, sometimes we use the definition of design a little too narrowly, but like, what are the key challenges that we're seeing around design leadership within organizations? Who wants to jump in on this one?
I can jump in because it kind of builds on what I just talked about. I think definitely one of the challenges of being in a large organization, especially one that's organized around products, and Amanda alluded to this, but you know, you have to make sure that there is sort of reach out and you're sort of putting tentacles around into other product areas because you don't want to end up shipping your org chart. So as a leader, I guess making sure that we have the right connections across the entire company so that people who are both working in different parts of our company in UX functions have kind of the same experience, the same set of expectations, and so that we're building a consistent experience for people. I think the other challenge of being a design leader is being really well versed in the language of business. You know, you have to, if you're talking to somebody who is dealing with sort of finance, or you're talking to the CEO, you have to be equipped to speak to them about things that they care about in terms that they care about. And so that means becoming more data literate and making sure that your team is more data literate and really sort of empowering them to think of themselves as business people as well as sort of creatives. I loved pretty much everything that Josh Brewer said about demystifying the design process, because I think if we don't do that, what people end up seeing is just the artifact at the end. You know, they end up seeing sort of the mock or the content doc or whatever it is, and they think that's what it means to be a designer. It means to create a mock, but actually it's all the stuff that happens in the earlier phases, all the thinking, all of the exploration, all of the user research that has informed that final piece that actually makes you a good designer or a good researcher or a good content strategist. So
what's the opportunity there? Like, how do we get people, how do we be more transparent so we're not Josh off in the corner saying design? Because I think we all identified with that at some level too, but like, how do we take this opportunity? How do we have our design be ambient around us, seen, known, understood by the rest of the people that we're working with or trying to influence?
I mean, I have opinions about that, but I don't want to talk too much. Let me leave it for somebody else, and if nobody has anything, I have something.
Gee, why don't you jump in on this? I can see the mic moving a little.
Well, I think so. There's a couple of things before I would want to jump on that. So the first thing in the industry right now that I see, and it's amongst designers and clients alike, there's a complete misunderstanding, I think, of what design is. There's just every which way you turn, people are talking about it in different ways, and it's just making it more and more convoluted. And we don't have a common language for the way that we really talk about design. I don't know if it's even possible to do that. We try to do that for the organisations that we work with, to create design systems and design languages and whatever else. But it seems that we're not very good at. It's like my husband's a plumber. It's like that saying that the plumber always has the worst plumbing. I think that's the same for designers. We're not very good at cleaning up our own backyard. So it's this really tricky situation at the moment, because certainly what I'm seeing in the industry personally is that there are becoming different levels of maturity around design. So in organisations, it's not as simple as a few years ago, where there probably wasn't that much depth of understanding about what design is. And now, one organisation might have a really high maturity when it comes to design. You're seeing things like having a chief design officer come in, and design is being elevated to have a seat at the table. But in other organisations, it might be more like a seat at the kids' table, because it's not quite elevated that much. It's like, yeah, we've got a few designers, we've got a few people who make the website, and then you've got even less maturity, and that could be that they don't even really understand anything about what design is, and they're still farming it out to agencies and so on, and not really understanding the value of it. And I think also in design companies, it's the same thing's happening. So when it comes to visibility of design and how to make that happen, certainly, bringing people into the design process is a great way to do it. But I guess it's always about context. You have to understand the maturity and appetite for design within the organisation that you're working in, and then you can figure out how you can make things more visible in that context. The way that I like to put it is that, let's say that I'm working with a bank. I am an expert in design. They are experts in banking. We have to figure out what design is within that context. It's not as simple as it's just design anymore.
Right. Everett, why don't you?
Yeah, I did. So I was just thinking back to that image of Josh in the corner, right? Design. And I think what we really need to do is really give those people the language, right? To be able to communicate, as well as stories, to be able to come out and share. And I think that that's something that can be really powerful, to make sure that, again, you can move from the kiddie table, let's say if that's where you are, the organization, to the big, or bigger people table, or wherever it is, to really get you to the next stage. And so those are the things that I think would be important in terms of giving the language, giving the stories.
Yeah, so there is some of it that from a day-to-day business as usual thing, that we want to have that transparency. This is what I'm hearing. But also that there needs to be a level of transparency across an organization about what is the impact, what is the value, what does design mean to a bank? What does design mean to a social network? What does design mean to search, to product that's being developed? And you do, you're totally right, Chief. There are so many different levels of buy-in in organizations. How many of us, can identify with that? Feel that there is a confusion around design at times, and what it is even. Yeah, I think that's, Brian doesn't have his hand up. Okay. There we go. But that's totally, that's an excellent point.
And can I just add one other thing, right? So design doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's this other thing that, to me, it's all day it's been the elephant in the room for me, and maybe that's because in the role that I'm in now, so I've kind of shifted from design practice to design operations, right? And so the thing that the elephant in the room for me is the business realities, and you touched on this, but so. And we should talk later, because I've done a lot of work on telcos.
Okay.
And so it would be very interesting to have a chat about it. But, just thinking about a telco that I used to work on a lot, they had, it's all in good. They had fantastic designers. They made this design team scale so much, and they were doing such great work, and they were doing all kinds of amazing things in terms of the customer experience. And then there was an executive leadership change, and it all went out the window, and 50 of them got made redundant. And then they brought in a whole bunch more people. And so what happened was all of that good language that you're talking about, all of that good stuff got lost. The language gets lost.
So part of it, though, is being able to use those stories to connect with other parts of the organization, right? So that they get it. So that, yeah, maybe a leader changes, but you've got enough champions across the organization. So for me, when I think about my teams, so I've developed over time a way to communicate, stories that I can tell. But I can't be in every room, right? I can't be in every conversation. And as I've gotten, I guess, more advanced in my career, now I'm maybe 3-4 levels away, right? We're away from some of these conversations. So yes, that can happen, but I think if you've done a really good job, ideally you've actually created champions across the organization, right? So maybe one leader will change, but there's enough momentum, enough understanding across the different groups so that you don't have, again, that whole scale,
we're
reversal.
gonna have to agree to disagree on this.
And it's officially a panel.
Only because when you've got an organisation of 80,000 people, let's say, it's very, very difficult to do. And I certainly don't think it's because it's a lack of good design. I think that it could be a number of reasons why these things don't last.
Yeah, often culture takes over. Right, and like you were talking about, there could be just this significant shift. Yeah. Amanda, how about you?
Sir, Steve, just before, if I could. So
okay, last one though.
I've worked in a big organization. IBM, very large organization. I was there in the early days of IBM Interactive and this big shift that the organization was going to go on. So yes, right, it is hard to shift big organizations. I've consulted to large enterprises, so big banks in Canada as well as other organizations. So yes, there's lots of reasons why it might not happen, but I am a firm believer that it's about creating champions across the organization, not just within a silo, right? So either that design or whatever area that you want to call it, and that's the way to success. So yes, we can agree to disagree.
Well, I agree with exactly what you're saying, but I'm just saying that it doesn't always work, and if it did, we wouldn't be here talking about it.
Agreed, it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
But I think that's something to aspire towards.
Yeah, I think it is lovely to be at a conference where we can share our realities. Where we can say, here's this inspiring presentation, and guess what? There's still some bullshit out there, and maybe a lot of it. Amanda, for you, what are some of the challenges you're seeing in design leadership, like from an industry lens? Like obviously you have a unique perspective. You're working with a company that serves a few people.
Yeah, I think for me sorry, what was that?
I said you're working for a company that serves a few people.
Oh, yeah, a couple people using the product. So the challenges that I face at Facebook that are different than I've experienced before. One is I'm starting to go deeper in designing the machine learning that generates results rather than just what you see on the page. There's a lot of different ways to rank something, and the way you rank in some ways reflects your culture. You could have a culture that is not very empowering to women, and more women will, when they search for mathematics, the type ahead that might be appropriate would be math is hard. And even though that's the thing that more women type, you can choose to put the same type ahead as what a man would get or not. And so there's interesting things, and as you look at other search engines, there's a lot of thinking going on around how to either reflect a current state or change a state, and a real value system there, and a responsibility there. So that's something that, there's no right or wrong answer, and that's something that I didn't encounter at other, there's no answer that doesn't have a downside, and it's not something that I encountered at other companies as deeply. And it's really interesting to me to start to think about how to design how machines rank information. I think that's extremely fascinating. I haven't seen a lot written about it. I haven't seen a lot of teams coming to a set of standards and ideals around it. The other thing that I think is different is I think we have a new relationship with technology. I think for a long time there was a feeling that like technology is good. It's just good. And I think that we're starting to be a culture that's thinking more critically around, you know, how often should we be on our phones? What is the impact of being on our phones to our families? How often should our children be on their phones? What is the impact of social networking on children? So I just think that there's a lot of moral questions that are being asked that haven't been asked before by designers, and I think that's a huge responsibility, and I think that it's a very ambiguous space, and I think it's also really valuable and exciting.
We're going to take a couple questions from the audience in a minute, so just giving you a chance to, hands like flying up, to prepare for that. But building off of that, like we're going to be heading into the next phase here, which is the future of design leadership. But what is the, I don't know how to phrase this properly, but like what is the ethical role of design? You know, as design leaders, what responsibility do we have to the people, the communities, that we are designing for, or are there those responsibilities? Because we represent up here quite a bit of influence, and so does everyone in this room. I think it's an important question for us to consider at some point.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I would be shocked if anybody would say designers should not worry about ethics, should not worry about the impact of their work on the community they're directly designing for and also the broader community. But I think what you need to be able to do is take that principled approach and turn it into something that is more tangible. And so, you know, one of the things that we're currently working on, and this is something that is going to be familiar to a lot of you, you probably all have principles that govern some of the decisions that you make, but we are actually rethinking some of our design principles right now. And part of the way that we're doing that is really thinking about how can we write a principle about how we approach design that actually helps you make a decision. So, you know, a very high-level principle might sound good, it might look good on a design system website, but if it's not a principle that actually helps you make a decision about how the organization wants to think and the kinds of experience we want to create, then it's not actually a very useful principle. So I think having alignment about what we're talking about when we talk about principles and ethics in a way that's pretty tangible is important. Because nobody would ever say, oh, trust doesn't matter. Nobody would ever say, oh, ethics don't matter. But
I was in a meeting once where stakeholders said, we want to make it more difficult.
Okay, but
I'll leave the out of like who it is, but I think it
Yeah.
happens. I think most people are good,
Yeah.
but not always. You know, and when we're put in a position of leadership, I think we have a different responsibility.
I agree, but I even think the people who maybe aren't good think they're good.
Yeah.
You know, so I think everybody thinks that they're making the right decision. So I think when you're talking about something like ethics, you have to make it as tangible as possible so people know sort of where you stand on certain kinds of decisions. Yeah.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? If not, we're...
I feel like you're going to call bullshit on me right now.
I'm absolutely going to call bullshit on you because, like, you know, you only have to... Okay, so there's so much shit design out there in the world right now. That's why we're all in jobs, because we're fixing so much stuff. No, like, honestly, come on. There's
job security.
It's good, right? It's good. Keeps us in jobs. But honestly, I mean, you got to think about what ethics really means. It's all about the context. Like, I don't think that anybody goes about thinking, oh God, I'm going to make something that's going to have some terrible outcome, although they do. If anybody's interested, I'm particularly anti-gambling, and there's a fantastic documentary called Ka-Ching that is about design in the, very specifically the slot machine industry and the level of dark UX that they use, and you will be shocked by what it is that they do. And unfortunately, I think it's some of the same type of tactics that some of our favourite companies over here might be using on us. So having a conversation about ethics, Don't get me wrong. I mean, look, I've deleted Facebook, so what do I care? But but truthfully, I mean, as I said, there's so much shit design out there. Sorry, like, for us to really care about ethics, we're going to have to really start thinking about the impact of what it is that we do. So I'll give you an example, just one, because it's something I think about a lot. Who uses bike sharing services? Has anybody heard about what happened with O-bikes in Australia?
No.
So O-bikes in Australia, so they're autonomous bikes, so you can, they're just single bikes that you can put your little thing in and off you go, you got a bike. And before that, we did have the bike racks, and they were doing really well, but then a few companies came into Australia and they started bringing these O-bikes out. Anyway, essentially what happened was people, particularly in my home city of Melbourne, started doing some pretty awesome things with them, like putting them in places that they shouldn't be, like the Yarra River. If you Google O-bike fishing, you will find a video on YouTube about people fishing O-bikes out of the Yarra River. And I'm not talking about one or two, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds. And so the intent there was probably not bad in terms of making a bike sharing service, but the impact of it was actually awful. And that company, and in fact more than one company, I think there's 2 companies now that have gone completely bankrupt as a result of this, as a result of what was designed, and there's no bike sharing now in Melbourne. So when we're talking about what, ethics is about context. It means different things in different situations, and as designers, we really need to think about what, when we talk about impact, unless we actually think about what the impact is, it is bullshit.
So I think we can, in our roles, get caught up in our business as usual, in the goals that we're being given or that we've already set for ourselves, or lose sight and get enveloped by the products that we work on, because sometimes they're massive or just we've been a part of it for so long. I think it's really important and our responsibility. Like, this room is full of people with a ton of influence and growing influence, for us to consider the impact of what we're doing. I could look at my job and saying, I'm selling more internet and cell phones and health products or whatever, but I actually want to step outside of that and say, how does this impact the lives of the people in the city of Vancouver, where I live? Because it matters. It really matters. And so as we think about the future of design leadership, I want to hear some of your questions. We want to hear them. And so if you've got a few questions, we're going to have one that was going to wrap us up here. But throw up your hand and please speak really loudly. I'll repeat it, but please speak loudly enough that I can hear. Okay, you just put up your hand, blonde hair, off to the side. Yep. Okay, so the question is, how would you, specific example of acting out on principles and a principled approach. Does that summarize it? Okay. Who'd like to take that? Amanda, would you like to jump in, or Everton?
In terms of, there's just so many different complexities with Facebook. I think it's just a matter of getting alignment on the goal. And then underneath that goal, what are the principles that are going to get you to that goal? And for me, at least, it really depends on the project. A lot of the projects that we work on are really specific and complicated. I talked about the online dating tool that we shipped recently, and there was just an extremely thorough process there. The designers that worked on that did a fantastic job of thinking about how this dating app was going to be different than the other dating apps that you see. And when you think about like the Facebook brand and what Facebook is, and then how would a dating app fit within that Facebook brand, it's a really complicated problem to solve. And so they thought about, like, Facebook specifically is about real names and real people, and your authentic self, and that was something that carried through into the app. They thought about some dating apps where you're like making an immediate judgment on someone by swiping, and wanted to be very deliberate about having a thoughtful, more deliberate approach to assessing people that involved like leaning into conversations and messaging. And so there was a lot of specifics that went into that, but it started with a set of product values for that particular product. And then you have to figure out how to make a V1 of that still ladders up to user value and your principles, but is something that isn't going to take 10 years to ship. And that's another area where you're working really, really closely with your engineering team to make sure that you ship something valuable. But so many discussions the designers had with, like you can just imagine, with legal, with policy. It was a real admirable design challenge that I think the design team did a great job with.
Okay, thank you. Let's take another question.
Steve, can I just give a quick example to that? Just it's pretty
Yeah.
quick. So one of our principles is to put merchants first. So in my job, I'm working on a platform that lets third parties build apps, provide services to merchants. When we're making decisions, we could often prioritize sort of the needs of our third parties over the needs of merchants. It's possible that we could do that. So with every experience we're working on, we're thinking, what is the merchant experience? And are we prioritizing merchant trust? Are we prioritizing the merchant experience? And that really does help us in a pretty tangible way make decisions when we're working on product.
Can I just add that principles are only good if you use them? And personally, I use them as a means to keep people accountable to what it is that they've designed. So you can actually turn them into a framework for critiquing your work. You can email me or message me on LinkedIn if you want, and I'll send you a framework for it.
Yeah, I know, like we're giving an hour to this, and our hour is closing in and being done. But I'm sure that if you wanted to reach out to us or find us afterwards, please ask more questions. Like this is an important discussion. I do want to take a couple more questions if possible. So right in the middle there, yeah. I'll jump in first. So this comes up a lot, if I'm honest, like that we have a business bottom line, something we have to meet, it doesn't work out, like a business ceases to exist eventually in our current systems if we can't continue to meet these financial goals. And so it feels like conflict sometimes to say, we've got to ship this thing. It's got to get out the door. It's got to meet these things. Continue to operate the way you have and just slightly improve. And often what I try to do, and I don't know if this is a good system or not, but is to find ways for our teams to be able to communicate to say, we are here so that in our case, our customers can buy these products a little bit easier or have a better customer experience or whatever. If we do that, we will achieve this. And so I don't really love operating in capitalism, if I'm honest. That's a whole nother panel. But I've found great success in communicating within that system to say, if we serve our customers better, you will see a better return on your investment. But I have to be able to prove that. That's a really difficult thing in design. And to stop and say, what is our baseline? Can we demonstrate some shift, some movement that effort either over time or short term? And to really, as a design leader, I think there's a huge responsibility to have really strong social skills, emotional intelligence, working with people to say, you need to give us the space and time to prove this, because it's not always immediate. And so there's some of that for me. I don't know, does anyone else want to jump in on that?
I think sometimes in those circumstances, it's often a case of somebody looking at a short-term metric or a short-term gain. And sometimes it helps to step back and sort of look at the long-term picture. You know, we want to be around, Shopify wants to be around in 100 years or more. And so we can do a lot of things really short term that will make our numbers look really great. But if they're not the right thing long term, then they're not the right thing for our company. And so being able to have those conversations, which I think actually goes back to being business minded and data literate, and being able to have conversations around metrics and data, and sort of pick those apart to understand what the core goal is, often helps.
I would totally agree with that. I think one tactic that I tend to coach designers to use when they're in a situation where they think that there might be a risk with something that we're doing short term that would hurt the experience long term is to make sure that we're also looking at counter metrics. And that we're, you know, coupling the A/B testing that we're doing with qualitative assessments as well.
Okay, I can't resist. Okay, right there. So you're, yeah.
I think that's totally right. I think that there's positive sides and downsides to every organizational structure, right? There's the design is centralized structure, and that's a place where you tend to get a lot of consistency. You get a lot of design looking across the board, and there are certain situations where design can really push through an initiative that wouldn't have been prioritized by any one of the individual teams. The difficulty there is that the XFN relationships can get taxed, and it can be more kind of, I don't know, structure or heavy-handedness to the design. And then when you put design into each individual functional team, you do get a lot of siloing. There's less friction, you're shipping things faster, but it's less cohesive. And so for my money, if I was the CEO of a company, I would change the org structure every 2 or 3 years to minimize the downsides and maximize the upsides of each one, and just go back and forth.
Yeah, I think silos are actually unavoidable, is the reality. And we often think about them completely negatively. But there are positives to be able to ship something faster. There are positives to have more consistency across design. I think a big part of that, and we're experiencing this pain and this opportunity right now, is to say, how do we as a culture within the company say, sure, you work with your team here, but you always need to think about the other teams. Take moments, whether it is ad hoc, to say, I'm going to have coffee with someone, just talk about what they're doing, or look for opportunities to jump in and to support that. But also, when you're producing something, like one of the things that helps us is we have and this is new to us, but within our design system, there's a community aspect of it where people can contribute back so that other people not only can reuse some of that work. So again, back to what Josh was saying, we're not off in a corner and someone's redesigning it 10 different times, but also so that someone can have exposure to what's happening and constantly be thinking about the community across the organization, because the design system isn't for designers, right? It is for the company. It's for the company to use. It's this codified thing that allows us to ship, well, ideally, allows us to ship things faster. But having the ability to open it up within your culture to think outside of your silos, but also to be efficient within them too. Like, it's just so easy for us to think about ourselves. And I don't think that's unique to design leadership or to any one person, is to be focused on the work that we do. And for us as leaders within organizations to say, no, think outside yourselves, not just for your customers or the people, the humans that we're serving, but for the people that we're working with. I think that's really important.
Design is not for you. It's really important to think about that. It's central to design. it's never for you. And it's one of the biggest problems, and it's the reason why there's still, there's ego in the past. I mean, I used to work in advertising agencies. You go into an advertising agency and it's all about winning awards. It's all about ego. But real design, really, really great design isn't about you. It isn't for you. It's about everyone else, including business.
Yeah, I think awards are bullshit, just to be honest. If you've won an award, congratulations. You probably deserve it. But should you have had to have paid? Certain agencies can afford more. And anyways, that's a whole other, again, panel. I just want us to be able to wrap up with one thing here. And so for each one of us on the panel to be able to share, thinking of the future of design leadership, so broadly too, or specifically if you'd like within the organization, what is one of the key skills, or some key skills, it's hard to narrow it down, that a design leader should have within their repertoire? What does a future design leader look like? What is something that they can have? And if you all say self-awareness, that's okay. So I will start, and I would say that one of the key skills a design leader needs to have is the ability to listen and to really hear people for what if. And so not be constantly trying to add our ideas to it or to rebut other ideas, but to listen for the possibilities that are out there. I think that is a key for a design leader. Otherwise, we're just building on our own experience, which is so narrow compared to the breadth of everyone we're working with.
I like that answer.
You want a story?
Yeah. Everyone want a story?
Want a story?
Do we have time for a story?
Yeah. All right. I'll get a story. All right. So this is about what the real future of design leadership is about.
So your company website says that you are about the future of design.
This ain't about my company. This is about my mum.
Oh, okay.
And about something that we all need to be a little bit afraid of. So my mum is a nurse, and she's been a nurse for almost 40 years. And last year she had long service leave. She was working at one of Australia's biggest health providers, and she had 5 months off. And she wasn't in a very good place. She was feeling like, it was only about 6 years until she would retire, that her career was over, that she had nothing left to give, that she was disenchanted with the health industry. And she said to me, and there'd been a bit of osmosis over the years. She knew a bit about design, and she said, "Do you think there's a design course that I could do?" And I said, "Yep." And I sent her off to a place called Academy XI, which is a little bit like General Assembly, but it's Australian-owned. And she did a service design course, a 12-week service design course. And interestingly enough, the teacher of the course was one of my proteges, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so she did the 12-week course, and of course then she went back to work. And the first day that she was back, she came home in tears. It had been a terrible day. She said she hated it. She didn't know what she was going to do. She started looking into early retirement. She didn't think it was possible for her to get a job in design. 2 weeks later, they made her redundant. So she was nearly 59, looking down the barrel of not having a job right when, she's only got 5 years to retire. She was very scared. And 2 weeks later, she got headhunted by a very interesting organisation. So it's another health service provider in Australia, but a little bit different, primarily working with people with disabilities. And they headhunted her because of her clinical background and her service design course. And so now she's working at one of only 2 facilities like it in the world. It's called VAS. And it is a facility that's not a care facility, but rather a residential facility for people who have ventilators. So that means they can't breathe on their own. And predominantly those people are people who are quadriplegics. Some people have MS and other muscle dystrophy problems, which basically means that the people who work there are their arms and legs and bodies. So the whole point of this facility is that the people who live there can live the most normal, happy lives that they can, doing whatever they want. And the job that my mum got and of course, as you can imagine, to do that for 20 odd people who live there, it takes an army of people, and the facility is just amazing. It's like Disneyland, backstage, front stage, amazing. Mum's job is to be the educator and experience officer for all of the people who have to facilitate that experience for those people who live there. And that to me is the future of design. It's going to be a shift from designers like me who only have ever done design to people who have, I want to say a real skill like Mum, but they have a specialization in another area, and then they have a secondary specialization, and that's design. So get ready, because it's on the horizon.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Maybe next time she can come back and do a talk for you guys, because I think that if you heard what she had to say, you'd be blown away. I could not be prouder. My absolute proudest moment as a designer.
So as I think about the future, trying to predict what skill will be important, for me, it's curiosity, because I don't know exactly where this is going to go. Like if I think back 10 years ago, I would not have been able to say that interaction design, some of these things have come to the level of prominence that they currently are. And I'm not sure 10 years from now what's going to be important. So for me, it's really about that curiosity to be able to continue to investigate some of the things that are starting to develop, right? To get those skills so that you're well positioned for the future and that you can take the next generation wherever it is that they need to go. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Wait, you already answered. No, I'm kidding. You get to give your own.
Yeah, I mean, well, as a manager, I guess I manage a set of managers, and so I think more about like how do you want to foster leaders, and what type of leadership do you want to foster? And I think something that's going to be very important is just coaching managers to handle situational leadership well. So rather than being like the same type of manager to each type of designer, really to sort of think about each person's career path very independently, to be much more hands-on in terms of creating a growth plan for each of their designers, to figure out what motivates each of the designers on their team, and to support each person in a really unique way.
Thank you.
So I have no idea what the future of design leadership is. Like, I'm just going to be really honest with you all. I don't know. But I will say that I think accessibility is a piece of it. And by that I mean, I make mistakes all the time. I try to be honest about them when I make them, which is, Steph is actually on my team, so she'll know. It's true. And I think there is this history of design leadership, which is almost like academia. You know, it's like this creative, and I actually hate the use of that word as a noun, this creative kind of in a glass tower. Yeah. Thank you, Chi. This creative sort of in a glass tower that is sort of, never making mistakes, is perfect, is untouchable, like the Don Draper kind of a character. And I don't think we build strong, empowered teams or do great work when we sort of put people up on pedestals like that. So I think, I hope that the future of design leadership is more accessible.
Yeah, this is great. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists. Let's give them a hand here. And I want to thank all of you for allowing us to go a little bit over on this. It was just a great discussion. And please do catch us as we're around. And I'm going to turn it back over to Preet.
Let's have a big round of applause for Steve for moderating, and all the panelists. Quite a few of them flew into the city. Yeah, we can leave it there. Thank you so much. I love that when the panel discussions are so candid. There's bullshit is called out a few times.